All right, so I am going to be going over numbers 1E of the first part. We did 1A and 1C in class. For the other ones, B, D, and F, I have kind of given you directions on how to get that started. For B, you're going to want to use the inverse trig function. For D, you're going to use trig or your 45, 45, 90 reference triangle, and I went ahead and put that there as well. And then for F, you are going to want to use your 45, 45, 90 reference triangle on that one as well. So I put the reference triangle there for your reference. I said reference twice. Okay, so with part E, anytime you are not given an angle measure here or here, and you're only given a 90-degree angle, that means you have to use Pythagorean theorem. You cannot use trig or your reference triangle. So we're going to use Pythagorean theorem to find our missing side length, x. Okay, so with Pythagorean theorem, we have a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Now, A and B both have to be legs. It is very important that those are your legs. So the legs of my triangle are here and here. Okay, so we're going to say we have x squared plus 4 squared equals, and then our hypotenuse is that 5 root 2 squared. Okay. So we have x squared plus 16 in this case, because 4 squared is 16, equals, and this is where you're going to want to grab your calculator, and you're going to want to make sure it is in parentheses, the 5 root 2. You'll end your parenthesis, end your parenthesis, and then you're going to square that. And it is going to give me 50. Oops, and I just cleared it, but it is 50. Okay, so with that, we can then go ahead and try to get x by itself by subtracting the 16. That gives me x squared equals 34. And I'm going to take the square root of that 34. The square root of 34 is not a perfect square. So with that being said, we're going to have to break that 34 down. So over here, I'm going to say 2 times 17. And those are actually both prime. Since both 2 and 17 are prime and there's no pairs, they just get multiplied back and put underneath the radical, which is going to give me that 34 back. So it's going to be x equals the square root of 34. Okay, moving on to number 2. For part A, I gave you some direction there. You're going to use that 30, 60, 90 reference triangle. And I also drew in that reference triangle if you did not have that in your notes, which you should have that written somewhere in your notes. Okay, now with part B, this one is a little bit harder because you actually do have to use the Pythagorean theorem twice. So if there's a 90-degree angle on this side, on that specific triangle, there's actually going to be a 90-degree angle on the other side as well, okay, because those are perpendicular, okay? So if we have a right triangle on this side, we have 2 sides of that triangle. I'm going to pull that triangle out. And I'm going to say that we have 6 and 10 as our sides. We need to find that middle side because that is going to help us find x. Okay, so I'm going to find that y. I'm just going to name it y. It really doesn't matter what you actually name it. And we're going to use Pythagorean theorem just like we did on part 1E. Okay, So again, we have a squared plus b squared equals c squared. A and B have to be your legs, so that's going to be 6 and y, because those are the legs of your right triangle. So we're going to say 6 squared plus y squared equals our hypotenuse, which is 10 squared. That gives me 36 plus y squared equals 100. And then I'm going to go ahead and get that y squared by itself. So I'm going to subtract the 36 on both sides. And that leaves me with y squared equals 64. At that point, we're going to go ahead and take the square root on both sides. And the square root, it is a perfect square. The square root of 64 is going to give me 8. So y is equal to 8. So now what I'm going to do is I am actually going to add in a little bit of space here. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to look at this other triangle now. So we're looking at this bigger triangle, because it's a right triangle as well. And I'm going to pull that out. Oops. Okay, our sides of that triangle are 8, because that's what we found, 8, and then we're trying to find x, our hypotenuse. So what I'm going to do, my legs, I'm going to use my Pythagorean theorem again. I have legs of 8. So I'm going to say 8 squared plus 8 squared equals my hypotenuse, x squared. And that's going to be 64 plus 64 equals x squared. And that gives me 128 equals x squared. To get x completely by itself, I'm going to take the square root on both sides. And we get x equals the square root of 128. Now, the issue here is 128 is not a perfect square, but it can be broken down. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to break that down. I'm going to say 64 times 2. 2 is prime. And then I'm going to break 64 down. Let's do 8 and 8. We can still break those 8s down to 4 and 2. The 2s there are prime, but the 4 is not, and that can also be broken down to 2 and 2. So I have a lot of 2s here. I have a pair of 2s here, here, and here. And then I have a loner 2 here. So I'm going to take out a 2 from each pair, and I have 3 of them. And then I have a loner 2 that goes underneath the radical. I end up getting 8 root 2, and that's going to be my final answer for x. Okay, so that one required you to do the Pythagorean theorem twice. Okay. For number 5, that's another one that I want you to do on your own. Please use number 6 as a reference. We did number 6 in class, and so that one is very similar, and I think you should use that as a reference to complete number 5. Let's scroll down to these word problems, and let's look at number 8. So, with these word problems, we're going to be using trig. For number 8, it says a child flies a kite. When the angle of elevation of the kite is 28 degrees, the kite is 200 feet above the ground. Okay, so we're going to say we have a kite that's 200 feet above the ground. Our angle of elevation there is 28 degrees. And it says, at this instant, how many feet of string is being used? And it says to round to the nearest tenth. It is super important that we read the directions about rounding. And so here it says to round to the nearest tenth. With this, though, it says, at this instant, how many feet of string is being used? So your string is going to be here. So that's going to be our X. That's what we're trying to find. So if we look at the sides we have, in relationship to angle 28, we have 200, which is our opposite side because it is across from the 28 degrees. And then we also have X, which is across from the 90-degree angle. So that's actually our hypotenuse. So if we have opposite and hypotenuse, we're going to be using sine. So we're going to say the sine of 28 is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. Here we're going to go ahead and cross multiply. So I get 200 is equal to X times the sine of 28. And to get X completely by itself, we have to divide that sine of 28 away. So I'm going to do that on both sides. Okay, so it cancels out on this side, and I end up with X is equal to 200 over the sine of 28. So let's go ahead and pull up our calculator, and we're going to say 200 divided by the sine of 28. And that's going to give me 426.01. So we get X is equal to 426.01. If we are rounding to the nearest tenth, we need to look at this decimal place and this decimal place. And since the 1 is less than 5, we can get rid of that 1 and the 0 will remain the same. So it's just going to be 126.0 feet. Okay, let's look at number 9. So with number 9, it says, suppose your angle of elevation to the top of a water tower is 78 degrees. So if you're standing on the ground and you have a water tower here, okay, it says your angle of elevation, so from you to the top of that water tower is going to be 78 degrees. If the water tower is 145 feet tall, we want to know how far you are standing from the water tower. So we want to know this distance, X. Okay, so with this one, we're looking at trig again. So if we look at our angle 78, we look across from that angle, we have our opposite side, and then we have our adjacent side. Okay, so in this case, we're going to be using tangent. We're going to say the tangent of 78 is equal to 145 over X. And we can cross multiply to find out what X is. So we get 145 equals X times the tangent of 78. To get X by itself, I'm going to go ahead and divide by the tangent of 78. Okay, and let's go ahead and cancel out those tangents. Oops, sorry guys. And we're going to say 145 divided by the tangent of 78. And that's going to give me 30.82. If we round that to the nearest tenth, it's going to give me 30.8. And that's going to be feet. All right, let's go ahead and look at these last two. So for number 10, it says the angle of depression from an airplane to the control tower is 49 degrees. So I'm going to draw it down here at the bottom. See how many of you make fun of my airplane again. Okay, so we have our airplane and we have our control tower down here. It says the angle of depression from the airplane to the control tower is 49 degrees. So if you're looking out of your airplane and then you look down, oh my goodness, at the control tower, you have a 49-degree angle is what it's telling us. It says the airplane is flying at 5,000 feet, which means it is 5,000 feet in the air. It says how far away, line of sight, from the plane is the control tower. Okay, so it wants to know this distance here. Now, the 49 feet is not technically in that triangle, but we know that alternate interior angles are congruent. So 49 feet is going to be in that bottom right-hand corner of my triangle. Okay, so if I am looking at 49, I can look across from that, and I have my opposite side, and then across from that 90-degree angle, I have my hypotenuse. So I'm going to be using sine to figure out the line of sight from the airplane to the control tower. So we have the sine of 49 is equal to opposite over my hypotenuse. And we're going to go ahead and cross multiply. So we get 5,000 is equal to x times the sine of 49. And then again, like we've been doing on the number 9 and number 8, we are going to divide by the sine of 49. To get our final answer. So the signs cancel out on the right side, and we can get our answer by taking 5,000 and dividing it by the sine of 49, which is going to give me 6,625 point, let's do 1, okay, 6,625.1 feet. Okay, now for part B, since there's two parts to this one, it's saying how far along the horizontal ground distance. So now it's wanting us to find that purple part at the bottom. So we're going to name that, let's name it Y. Okay, so this time, this side is going to be my adjacent side. So I'm going to be using tangent this time because I have my opposite side, which is 5,000, and then I have my adjacent side this time that I'm trying to find, which is Y. So we're going to say the tangent of 49 is equal to my opposite over my adjacent. Oops, sorry guys, that's going to be a Y. Okay, so I'm going to cross multiply, which gives me 5,000 is equal to the tangent 49 times y. In order to get y completely by itself, again, we're going to divide by the tangent of 49. Let's go ahead and let's see what that gives us. That's going to give us 5,000 divided by the tangent of 49 gives us 4,346.4 if we're rounding to the nearest tenth. So we have 4,346.4. We're going to say feet. For number 11, it says we have a lake and it measures 6,000 feet. So let's have a lake, 600 feet across. So we're saying 600 feet across this lake. It says a lodge stands on one shore. So it's right on the shore. Let's go ahead and draw our lodge. Oops, not what I wanted. Okay, we have a house. And it stands right on that shore. So it says from your point on the opposite shore, it says the angle of elevation to the top of that lodge is 4 degrees. And then it wants to know how high above the lake does the lodge stand. So if we measure that distance across, we are 600 across. We have a 4-degree angle, and we want to know how high that lodge is. So we want to find x. So in order to find x here, I'm going to use trig. I have my adjacent side of 600, and I have my opposite side over here of x. So I am going to use tangent again. I'm going to say the tangent of my angle 4 is equal to opposite over adjacent. And then I'm going to cross multiply. So I get x times 1 is x, and 600 times the tangent of 4 on the other side. Okay, and let's go ahead and let's figure out what that is. 600 times the tangent of 4 gives me 41.9, and it says in the directions to round your answer to the nearest foot. Okay, so if we have 41.9, we're going to round that to the nearest whole number, which is going to be 42 feet. Okay, all right, so that only leaves you guys with 5 questions to do tonight on your own. And then we will be taking our quiz tomorrow.